Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming. This is another episode of Wireframe brought to you by Design Systems House. I'm your host, Di D'Amato, and today we're going to be talking about working with AI, which of course everyone's doing right now. We are working with AI and hopefully get into a little bit of the ethics of that thing. We haven't had a show in a little while. I've been out traveling and going to conferences. There's another conference I'm going to be at tomorrow with DDX here in the city. So I hope to see you over there. But all of that could wait. There'll be other opportunities for us to talk about things that I've been doing. But more importantly, I have a special guest on the show. I want to introduce you all to David Whitewolf. David, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. Let the folks know who you are and what you're doing out there. Yeah, let's start with that.
Sarah, thank you for having me. And my name is David Whitewolf. As said, I work in AI accessibility in New York, NYU, and it's basically, AI research independent. And it's interesting because, AI, and there are some people who are against it. Yet when I tell them I work at AI and accessibility, they have nothing to say. So it's very interesting, like little niche field.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So David and I actually met at a hackathon a couple weeks ago. And in fact, I picked him out in particular because he had 4 screens at his desk, which actually the one of the laptops that he was using is actually the same laptop that I used, but he was also using another one that I was looking at. So I had to ask him because clearly he's using that. Those devices. So I was asking about those devices because I'm very into like that unique tech. So I was asking, how he likes those the dual screen laptop scenarios, and there's pros and cons, absolutely. But the thing that I think, I guess resonated a lot with me in particular was accessibility and AI, right? Because I don't think there's a lot of people in the space doing those two things effectively. I see a lot of folks who are in the AI space and kind of, almost forget about accessibility, or people in the accessibility space that are kind of anti-AI. So how are you bridging those two things together?
Well, honestly, just with engagement, because, unfortunately, accessibility is still an afterthought, right?
Mhm.
And many platforms, but yeah, for me, fortunately, I was originally how I got to NYU Tandon is up through a different hardware startup called LTC Level the Curve. And I went into transition to AI because I thought it was just interesting, and it's been touching every aspect of our lives. But yeah, I noticed that no one's talking about accessibility yet again, a similar trend, and how basically another also thing that's also unfortunate is that disability experts are often left out the conversation of solutions, which shouldn't be the case because I believe we talked briefly about this how I'm not low vision, but yet we should probably consult someone who is low vision. I was like, hey, how would you interact with these modules and stuff, et cetera? Because they're the ones who's going to be engaging with these systems, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, do you have an opportunity to interact with lots of different kinds of accessibility needs? You mentioned the low visions, as one of them, but how do you go out and seek for these folks to get their feedback about these experiences?
Well, unfortunately, they come to me. So,
Okay.
which is like, because I know I shouldn't be like, okay, how do I go seek them out? But then I have to like come with them with like a baseline solution. Like, say, right now, my current project is a 3D printer, and I'm trying to make it more dexterity friendly. Because when you look at the slicers, for example, it's a knob mostly, which is great because if you don't have like dexterity in the hands, I'm going to fingertips, you can just like move. However, what happens if you don't have that kind of dexterity? Do you have to talk into the module? And there's absolutely little to no support for those kind of things. So, but that's what I'm working at. And then the touch panel, again, like someone who can't see, like it doesn't really, talk to you, like text to speech type situation.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting place to be looking at. I mean, when I think about accessibility challenges,
Hmm.
one of the first things that I think about is a canvas like Figma, right? So
Right.
you have like this infinite canvas that you can move elements all over the place and drag and things of that nature. So I've always thought of that as being a huge accessibility challenge about how you would potentially make this infinite canvas or this ability to move something in the middle of space. How do you make it so that that's accessible to folks who have low motor skills or can't even see the canvas? So what are the ways that you are solving that for these folks, or if there's anything similar?
Well, fortunately, there's an open source community like in GitHub and stuff, and what they ask us to do basically is make sure there's a if there's like already something out there, and try not to like code anything from the base up,
Hmm.
and then try not to like stay away from the phrase reverse engineering because we don't want to get accused of stealing. Because the accessibility community, another barrier to many things they go through is financial means, because they have to spend more for their end user needs, and it can be like a bunch of things too that me and you are not really into, because we don't experience those kind of barriers. Basically, it's just like how, like, what's the interaction? How does, if I want to like design something, right? And and if it's a person's low vision, I do not want to say how does that look like,
Mm.
you have to say like what is that experience, is that what that experience is like that for you, because I would never have been able to imagine not being able to see, just
Hmm.
the best I can do is close my eyes, but it has to be more than that, because it's only I have the choice to open my eyes, and almost instinctively you do. And I ask people like, yeah, just close your eyes and see how long you can last, and without you open your eyes, and it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, like I've done some classes that I teach students a little bit about accessibility. The way that I would teach them this is I tell them to go to their favorite shopping website, right? Whatever favorite shopping website you got, that go over there and just once you get there, don't do anything, right?
Mhm.
Just don't do anything. Just get to the homepage. Okay, so that's the first thing. Then I say, okay, when I say go, I want you to put your favorite thing into the shopping cart with one caveat: you can't use the mouse, right? That's it. That's it. Put your favorite thing in the shopping cart. You can't use the mouse, right? And I think only one person was able to do it out of the 25 people I had in the class there. So that gives them a little bit of an insight into, a lack of ability there. I mean, even when you have like a broken arm and you have it like in a sling, and it's your dominant arm that normally be attached to the mouse. I mean, trying to move your mouse with the left hand is its own like motor skill challenge, right? Because everything's kind of like in reverse for a little while until you get the hang of it. And just like you're talking about when you close your eyes, right? Closing your eyes is just a very small moment of you not being able to see and trying to, I guess, practice not being able to see sounds like a really hard task for someone who can see, right? If you can see, why would you ever not see, not want to see, right? But you would have to have this like very deliberate kind of action or feeling to say, no, I'm going to try to experience this or the world as a person who has low vision or otherwise. And I know there's like also different like apparatus and things like that that people can use to like kind of augment a little bit. So I've seen like the glasses that make it really hard to see, and like even like mobility suits that like restrict
Mhm.
motion and stuff like that. So I've seen a lot of the those kinds of techniques to like get the feeling for people in the space. Have you done anything like that where you're like, trying to get in the person's shoes?
I've tried, like first, like with closing my eyes or restricting movement, like dexterity, and for us is like, I feel like AI is a great equalizer in all this,
Mm,
and and how can we apply this, to accessibility and needs? Because we shouldn't be able to, we don't have to hard code everything from the scratch. We can exactly deploy it as needed, and the great thing, like I just noticed a trend. I don't know if you noticed. I don't know if it's if there's a trend like that, but I did notice that we're moving away from one shoe fits all types of solutions because
Mhm,
every end user has a different need,
mhm.
and given the fact that we have like almost like we came some long way since like the first time they sent someone to the moon on 4 kilobytes of data.
Yeah.
And now we have like what is it, quarter million? Forgive me if I'm misrepresenting the numbers. What, quarter million more stronger computing power in our pockets on average?
Mhm.
It shouldn't be like an afterthought. It should be just like baseline. However, that's what's still dealing with this, and we're trying to use AI to like hopefully bridge that gap and like lower the barrier for the accessible community and establish workflows. Because if you don't have to like code base from something for like basically you don't have to discover the wheel every single time, and we shouldn't, right?
Right, right, exactly. I mean, in a best case scenario, we would be meeting user expectations, right? So you're not reinventing the wheel all these times. You are aligning to the user expectations. The difficulty here, of course, is that when just like you mentioned, there are these hyper personal um, experiences now, right, with AI that are making it so that everyone one can have their own experience. So now you have this battle where we're trying to meet user expectations, but every user is different. So how could you possibly meet and what is effectively 8 billion expectations, right? That's the number of people on Earth, right? More or less. So you're trying to meet the expectations of everyone, almost individually. And that's why, like universal design as a concept, which basically says to, kind of design for the majority, that's been the general direction that we've taken for a really long time. But that has alienated folks that require assistive technologies to function in the world semi normally. So this idea of AI enhancing folks and improving their lives is really fascinating. So I mean, what people are doing out there, of course, is a lot of chat, right? There's a lot of chat that's happening in when we're talking about AI and experiences. Is chat um, the primary way of interfacing for folks that require these assistive technologies, or is there something else in the AI space that's also helping them that's not chat?
Well, there's technically yes and no because there's different variations because some they can't speak, right, and they never were able to speak,
Hmm.
so they weren't able to develop that internal monologue.
Hmm.
So there's forgive me, I forgot this lad's name. There's a speech pathologist who works with kids out in the Midwest, I believe, uh, Tennessee, and he's working with kids who never were able to speak
Hmm.
because they have an injury or like they were born with like an injury with their neck, and that was not let them speak through like their diaphragm or their jaw.
Okay.
What he did is he basically developed his own platform where he took like I don't know why he chose this specific genre, hip hop, and he took all their voices and he would give them to kids, and now they can hear, so they can pretty much know what people sound like, right?
Hmm.
And they would mash up the words, so it'd be like it would be the voice of Rihanna saying the, or it'd be Jay Z saying this, and it'd be all combinations, and the kids love it.
Hmm.
For us, it'd be like, well, that's kind of trippy, but for the kids who don't have that internal monologue, it's interesting to see that. But that's like a very specific niche thing. It's like not open source because he was talking about, barrier entry for bureaucracy because it is technically using other people's voices.
Hmm.
There are stuff like that, and people like are interesting, like because I'm sure like likeness is a thing where you don't want people using your likeness.
Hmm.
And right now, I think that people are like gonna start training their own voices and lending those people out to like fill those case use scenarios specifically because for someone like I understand you don't want to use your likeness, but what if it's a kid who never had that opportunity but now can communicate using your voice? Would that be okay in that sense? And that's where I believe I spoke to you. It was like that's why I get little to no resistance when I'm talking about AI and accessibility because that's like a good use case scenario for using someone's likeness, right?
I mean, maybe. I mean, it's again. I actually haven't really thought about um, you know the parts that you're talking about. I mean, I've thought about the likeness pieces of
Hmm.
this before, especially with like 11 Labs. Like 11 Labs trying to. I remember there was a story with 11 Labs where I think there was a person who was losing their voice,
Hmm.
and they were trying to effectively capture this person, and their speech patterns and et cetera, so that if they were able to type almost like a Stephen Hawking kind of
Hmm.
scenario, the system would be able to speak on their behalf in their voice, their intonation, and things like that. So in that way, I
Hmm.
think there's a huge amount of value in that. However, on the flip side, right, you could have, um, voice actors that are effectively, captured, that didn't ask to be captured, right? And are now out there in the world, unfortunately, as models that people could just like use. I'm saying this in particular, actually, pretty topically, because last weekend
Hmm.
I was out in Oregon for a very nerdy convention. It was Short Circuit's, the movie's 40th anniversary, and the
Yes.
voice of Short Circuit, Tim Blaney, was there. And he would every once in a while like do the voice of Johnny Five the robot, which was really fun to like experience that that the kind of like that back in the day for me. But I actually asked them. I said, is it possible to like you know pay for your voice, so to speak? And he's like, oh,
Mhm.
well, actually, I think the producer owns the voice now. So like you'd have to ask the producers or whatever about getting the voice. But at the end of the day, what's stopping me or anyone from getting a large language model or 11 Labs to go through both movies and be like, yeah, give me that voice, right? And now it's mine. What are you going to do, right? It's the same thing that big tech companies have done a lot of, just stealing people's information without even worrying about it. Um, you know, and I think this dovetails into the ethics conversation,
Mhm.
right? Where what is that good, not good? What parts of it are good? What parts are not good? How far do we go, right? Because you think about like the impact that AI has had, but maybe
Mhm.
it wouldn't have had so much impact if we went and did everything by the book, right? So what are your thoughts on that in, ethics in the AI piece there?
Well, that's the thing where that's where I'm the opposite side of that spectrum because there is so you have that one side, like one of the many sides, right? But yet what do you do when someone has like a speech impediment, but yet you have to train that model and it sounds more like me and you
Hmm.
versus how there are ones on the spectrum who can't really speak, but you can sort of make out, but you have to get used to it after a while.
Hmm.
And um, and unfortunately that's how it is, and it takes time to like get adjustment to those speech patterns and inflections. Yet there are AI systems I know of, I haven't tested them, I haven't seen them in real life, where they train the model and it sounds more like me and you speak. I don't know the exact terminology, we're like normal, I don't want to say normal speak, but the way we can like conceptualize or talk, like hey, it doesn't take adjustments or like think of accents. So in this sense, like that amount of training is the same as that. However, it's like two different use case scenarios. It's really a humanistic thing, like okay, the training method is roughly the same, but the use case is like different. But you're gonna demonize if you're on that end of a course, like if someone doesn't want to use their voice or someone owns someone's voice, you know, it's like, what do we do in that instance? But yet, if that becomes an issue, that will go against the fundamental technology of being trained that, and it affects the other side where someone is really trying to figure out how to like sound more like colloquial, if that makes any sense.
I think I know what you're saying there, right?
Mhm.
I guess that the idea would be like, maybe a person who's not a native speaker, right?
Mhm.
And you want to sound more like a native speaker, such that
Mhm.
you are kind of, I don't know, accepted more, right? Because there's like definitely a feeling of, if I can't speak the language well, then
Mhm.
you get this unfortunate kind of bias in a room of people who can, that go, oh, well, this person's not smart because they can't speak the language. Meanwhile, on the flip side, which is, this is the crazy thing to me, is that person who's trying to speak the language, they
Mhm.
speak at least two languages. So
Correct. Yeah.
effectively, bottom line is, are effectively smarter than the
Mhm.
people who could just speak one, right? So it's just, it boggles my mind when people are just, have that bias that goes, oh, okay, well, that person's not smart enough because they're not speaking their language well, when in reality they're actually very smart because they're actually speaking at least two languages, if not more. So, but I could see some value into wanting to put your best self forward, even
Hmm.
if it's not truthful, right? Or entirely 100% you, right? And I think this is, I mean, aligned to like the way that you might speak on LinkedIn, right? When you're speaking on LinkedIn, you're just like trying to make it as professional as fucking possible. And then
Yeah.
you maybe, the same person goes to Twitter and is an absolute fucking, belligerent, right? So
Right.
it's, I think, a similar kind of way where, beforehand it was literally just, hey, I'm just going to speak, you know, uh, in text, and I could code switch, from my normal voice and my normal, day to day, but I could code switch into a, I don't know, jerk online because that's what I want to do, or I could code switch into a really nice person online or whatever. But it usually would just stop there. Now, what you could do, of course, with AI is you could be a totally different person in one way or another just from the presentation. I could be AI right now and make sure that I don't have any particular uh, ums or ahs or
Mhm.
duh or whatever of me trying to figure out what I'm going to say. It could be really well kept, which would again put the best foot forward. But ethically, I mean, I don't know. What do you think on that?
Well, that's the thing too with the accents and stuff, where there's certain individuals on the spectrum who have a certain inflection, and there's a tolerance between the ranges.
Hmm.
However, what's interesting to me, and I want to read more into it with white papers and stuff, and do actual research according to that, because it seems like New York accents, right, or
Hmm.
like accents become as localized, but those on the spectrum, with the same tolerances, it's not like they grew up next to each other, or like came together. It was like, hey, we're going to speak like this, you
Right.
know and unfortunately, like you said, just because you don't sound like or sound colloquial enough, you get like, oh, there's a stigma towards your intelligence, which shouldn't be the case. And those who are even more, but their mental faculties are still there, they just can't speak.
Hmm.
That's also disheartening too. However, there were large language models. I mean, I'm not sure which one specifically, but they do train for, hey, your voice could sound like this if it was colloquial. Nothing that there's nothing wrong, but it saves time and saves energy, like in that heartache from person, because the end user, who can't communicate, wants to communicate with you, right? And they feel more heard and more accepted if they are more comfortable. And it's like and I can imagine them being like their eyes light up like, holy, I sound like you.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we're humans are like very social creatures by nature, but with AI and all that jazz. But ironically enough, we're the most connected society in all time, yet we they're still at the back of being alone. And but AI is hopefully we really are trying to like make this very accessible, friendly for everybody. And again, like how does someone like go against like things like that in nature when training, like yes, they cost money, yes, they cost resources, but there is like I'm also interested in figuring out. I haven't encountered this yet,
Hmm.
where people are against AI and accessibility, and I really do want to hear an argument for it. Like I
Hmm.
get it, like each case scenarios, like you said, is one specific one person. However, it doesn't matter because we're impacting that one person's life, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
So a couple of things I want to pluck out. The first thing I want to mention actually that you said there was really interesting about how everyone in New York didn't agree on the accent. It just ended up being the accent that we're
Mhm.
talking about. When it's cold outside, it's brick. That's of course a
Right.
word in there,
Mhm.
but
Of
it's not
course.
necessarily talking about the accent. But we all agree about what that means, right? So it's very interesting where that kind of happened organically, but what we're kind of discussing here is the possibility of you being able to, uh, s- I mean, certainly synthetically, but more so like curate exactly how you want to sound, right?
Mhm.
So if something sounds too abrasive, you could effectively dial it back and feel more friendly, right? Like I think of in my personal life when I was young, I had an Italian teacher, and I, because of my voice, For whatever reason, this Italian teacher thought that I was always giving them an attitude all the time. And I would always be scolded, because I was giving an attitude. Meanwhile, it's just my voice being loud and I guess, I don't know, just active. I don't know what else to say about my voice and how to describe it necessarily. You could hear it. But effectively, they were always saying that I was like, had some sort of attitude where I was like, I never did. I even remember another time where I had a similar kind of feedback. I was trying to get this job, and I went into the office in Manhattan from Long Island 5 times to try to get this particular job. And on the fifth time, I was there to talk to the HR rep, and I asked the HR rep very like coyly. I was just very like taken aback and tried to, very very calm and like,
Mhm.
hey, I don't. I basically said it like this. I don't know what the process is, so I'm hoping you could help me out. But like, how many times do you think I'll need to come in to complete this process? And I remember her saying very very specifically, as many times as we want. I was like, in my
Wow.
mind, I'm like, what a fucking bitch. And admittedly, the weird thing about that, again, me being like trying to, take steps back and like bring my New York the whole way down for that particular conversation, because again, I'm trying to get this job out here. Um, I remember the hiring manager. I had her phone number because we hit it off so well, and she texted me afterwards. She said, "What did you say to the HR person?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said that you were rude and asked how many times you had to come in. I said, is it rude for me to just ask? Like, didn't raise my voice. I didn't, and it was just like, if I had the opportunity to come in as professional as possible, right?
Mhm.
And get past this person who I will never ever see again, right? This HR person I will never ever see again, suddenly has the power to go ahead and give me the binary true false on me getting employed here. It was ridiculous, because I we hit it off so well with the actual team that I was going to work with, that this one person again had nothing to do with this. It was literally just a hurdle that needed to be cleared, and I couldn't clear it because we just didn't connect, and that was awful in that sense in what I was thinking about. There was a second thing that I wanted to talk about, but I went on a crazy tangent there, so I apologize. But we were getting upon um, the ethics still, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How
Um,
you, of course, value the use of lexicon and how some words sound more proper than others. And, that's a thing too. We're hoping to engage it like with the large language models with those guys, because I haven't had an opportunity, but I am interested in that space too, because like I said, like, it's not like the individual on the spectrum. There is a noticeable inflection they have, and I really like for them specifically, like us, we grew up in New York, right? So there's like variations. It makes sense for them. It's not like they came together and agreed, or like organically. However, it's like I'm thinking that when they do the voiceovers, they can do those, and they are able. And I'm going to like start digging into those large language models to see, and introduce them to like the kids who like, hey, this may sound like you, if your speech impediment wasn't like as apparent as others. And again, ethically, we shouldn't really think about that, because there is a stigma tied to like people who can't speak, or who can't communicate verbally, and it's like we should go past that, honestly.
yeah, definitely. I mean, uh, from the accessibility point of view, I mean, these people have credit cards, right? These people have credit cards. They want to buy products. They want to be involved in society. And if there's barriers in which they are unable to do that, then that sucks. But we could absolutely use, the technology is at hand to help that out.
Yeah,
Um,
there's another space too where they just want to like do things for leisure, and that's
mm,
another extra niche things where you don't really talk about, and like, and people who want to make their livelihood. There's a lad here by Luc Dubois, very respectable guy. I have so much respect for him. NYU had this one student with a low vision, right?
mhm.
Based, and she just was kept getting stuck because they weren't able to accommodate her enough time. Like imagine she's trying to be a music producer, she wants to be a DJ, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And blind DJ, great, I'm there for it. However, if you ever mix with music, you do like media stuff. You see like the moms imagine like not being able to see those connections, those plugins. So Mr. Dubois, what he did, he literally like it took too long for NYU because it would be a week, and her like workload would start stacking up, and she didn't want to fall behind. So he basically just rewrote everything, made Braille for like the keyboards, and program everything in C++ and C because of the timing between getting the signal for synthesizers is a lot less lenient than Python. Like, and he was just smiling all these things. And I'm like, sir, you're an amazing person. I'm thinking like, this girl is attending a world-class institution and they can't accommodate her. They didn't even, and now she has to, like I said, accessibility is an afterthought. She was already in the classes a week into, and it would take a week, like 5 days for them to get back to her. And he's like, no, unacceptable. And unfortunately, another thing too is like, if it wasn't for him, I don't know where it should be,
Right.
because I wasn't aware, and I was like, I would love to engage like things like that. And there's like so many avenues, and that's the kind of impact I want to make. And again, yeah, sure, it's only one student, but still, like that person is a human.
Right. And it's also doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't any other blind DJs out there. I mean, there absolutely could be,
Mhm.
people who are low vision that are into music because that's where the sensory is, and that's where their feelings are, and their expertise ends up being because of all the sensory tuneness that's there because of the lack thereof of the vision. So I think it's not unreasonable to want to enhance the way that a low vision person might experience sound, right, through either DJing or just music manipulation in general. I could even imagine. I kind of, I kind of wonder what the solutions are for a low vision person who wants to DJ. I mean, like, you know, you wouldn't necessarily. I'm just imagining, and maybe I don't know if you have any insights on this, but I'm imagining where, normally if it's low vision for someone, they're usually using announcements to know where you are in an interface.
Mhm.
But for something that's DJing where you're going to be listening to music and those announcements are going to be drowned out if there's any announcements that's happening in there, right? Or it's going to be, distracting to the actual beat matching that you might be doing. So I'm almost wondering, like, I'm like almost envisioning this like braille system, so to speak, of like being able to feel waveforms of music. I think that would be fascinating, right?
There, there is a prototype, because I wasn't forced to sign NDAs, where basically where there's by a person named Eric Singer. He has this device where you can go above a keyboard and it
Hmm.
will tell you like, okay, this is A key or this B key, without also the braille, and also to like do the synthesizers. And basically it will like toggle onto your wrist, so you have to keep with the brailles. And I was like, oh wow, that's an amazing application for someone who like who has low vision, stuff like that. And that's exactly, almost exactly, not to one ratio what you're talking about, but basically it's there and I've seen it and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Unfortunately, it's like he doesn't know how to market it. He doesn't know how to like
Mm.
come in production, because that's another thing too, because you have to, once you sell a thing, there's a whole different part of, making the thing and then making it last like, say, a million cycles, because you don't want the thing to break, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a huge other part of what we're talking about when it comes to inclusive design, which
Mm-hmm.
is now when you're making especially physical products, right? Because software effectively is cheap, so to speak, right? Especially when you can have AI kind of just generate it or whatever. But
Yeah.
when you are adding something tactile to it, especially for things like low vision, that becomes more mechanical, right? More physical, and has more prone to being to breaking in ways that we can't yet immediately fix in some cases, especially when it's so bespoke, right? When you have such a specific experience to a particular person, right? It generally ends up becoming very expensive because all of those pieces are custom to that person and that person's needs. The reason why many things in our world are cheaper or less expensive, generally speaking, is
Mhm.
because there's molds that allow us to just
Yeah.
make lots of them for lots of people. Once we have a single mold for a single person, that's very expensive because it's only for the one person. So luckily there's 3D printing now, right? That has the opportunity there. I mean, actually, that's an interesting thing that I just thought of just now. Is there any work that you know of that's basically using, you kind of mentioned this maybe a little bit earlier, but using AI and 3D printing together to effectively make physical products for individuals? Is that happening at all?
Yeah, it's I've heard of it. And it came up. I didn't independently like myself. I definitely wasn't the first one to think. I was like, there has to be a thing where it was like, okay, hey, whatever large language model, make me a brick, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from there, and I'm not sure if anybody knows about like higher topological algebra or like quaternion, where you basically take the subtraction of like any shape and you program that. However, it's like I'm very certain any large language models can make you a square or trapezoid or like then you get more intricate portions. And I was like, why not? Because text to speech is a thing, and when you get like these shapes, it would be interesting seeing like how a person who never seen these shapes, right? How does it feel, and
Mm-hmm.
how do you translate that feeling into actual like tactile feedback? But there are certain things out there, but I'm not entirely sure like if it's all open source yet. But
Sure.
that's another area because I see, as you can see, there's like just so much out there, and even for me, wow, there's just so much out there, and I'm in a little very niche corner of AI.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the sky's the limit from here on out, and I'm like really excited to keep going into those things and for it to develop like simulation like tolerances of breakage. I think that we can develop specific simulations, and there are simulation softwares out there already. However, like I said, each use case here is kind of specific, and by that we should be able to be more cost effective in knowing those things before we make into production.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, we talked a lot about obviously the ethics and the AI parts in here.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that's important in this conversation?
Yeah, just more people engaging in the fact that these shouldn't be an afterthought, like because if you notice, like I was like giving us unique perspective, and when I go to these conferences, when I go, it's like I always ask the questions like, "Is this accessible?"
Yeah.
And they're like, and I'm like, it's like, and I kind of want to rephrase also that phrase because I don't want to make it seem like I'm getting at them for it,
Mm-hmm.
and I just want to make like a point where it's like you see, it's like I know you're not thinking of a city. It's like I know you're not purposely not thinking about the community, you know. And I just want to make sure, like you're aware of, like, hey, there are needs, and there are people who not only in addition to like physical like aspects, like for example, have you ever noticed how the doorknobs are no longer doors, are just latches nowadays?
Mm.
Yeah, if you pay attention, like a lot of the world is like, wow, there are no more doorknobs, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that, like I really admire, and I'm hoping like AI, like would also bridge that, lower the barrier as well.
Yeah. Now, when you're out there and you're asking about, did you think about accessibility, right?
Mhm.
What happens when they say yes? Do you just believe them? Do you go deep, go further? What do you do in that particular situation?
To be fair, I haven't had a yes,
Okay.
but but however, I will be fair. I don't think I've gotten as many as I should. And I'm trying to figure out a nice little, balance, whether should I go out there and see what's out there, or should I stay in this like, little cubicle and figure things out.
Mm-hmm.
So, I personally right now, I think I'm at a point where I think I should go out and more and see like what else is out there and how AI is applied. And, you know, in addition to going like regular conferences or regular hackathons. And fortunately, like my last hackathons, I have not thought about accessibility because I couldn't fit those functions inside that time frame. It's another thing too, where I also have like in my bin pin of like, okay, these hackathons, they're not really accessible friendly.
Right. Right.
Like if you look at all these different platforms, and the last thing you saw me was building was because design like those nodes, seeing because everybody knows like a node is basically like a circle or a sphere. You can it's round, it's shapeless. It doesn't have like hard edges. That would be easier to interpret. Where there is like an odd shape, like any like odd shape versus that. So that's why I thought of that in accessibility, so I can make the components. But no, I haven't had a yes yet. I'm
Okay.
sure they're out there.
Yeah, I mean, I hope they are too. And I guess it's funny about talking about the hackathon thing is I just had an idea in my mind of having an accessible hackathon, right? Because
Great.
traditionally, right,
Hmm.
especially like the hackathon that I was at, I was a judge for the hackathon that we met at. Um, the big thing that I found as a judge for the hackathon was effectively, did the thing do what it says on the tin, right? Does it behave properly? Does it have a good experience from a universal design aspect, right? Which is the 80% of people out there. And that, again, generally speaking, that's what people are expecting out there, because in that room, we had the 80% generally speaking, right? They're all people that could see, they all had both hands, fine motor skills, all that stuff were people that had the ability in that room. So that's what they're aligning to, right? Um, so when we as accessibility advocates say you should be building an accessibility inside of the product, that's, I think, assuming that you have enough runway to do all of the right things. When you don't have all the runway to do all the right things, then of course some things are deprioritized, and one of those things ends up being accessibility often, right? Because again, if we just hit the 80%, then we can hit the other 20% over time afterwards once we've like MVP'd this thing. But I think there's something really interesting about a accessibility hackathon, right? Where the goal isn't necessarily to make a product that's like different and unique or whatever, but maybe it's to remake an existing one, but make it accessible, right? So that the focus would be, okay, well, here's, I don't know, even just an AI chat experience, right?
Hmm.
Let's make the AI chat experience accessible and how you might do that. And then the judges would all effectively be people who use assistive technologies to navigate these experiences, and then of course judge how well they're able to complete tasks, almost like research study like. I think that would be a fascinating um what's it called, event, right? Especially like for the web accessibility meetup that's in New York that we were also both at a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, because we were trying to figure out. I was helping out with this event where there's this group called Tech Kids Unlimited at ONU. They basically help kids on a spectrum have like give them qualities like for they can support themselves and have be job ready skills. And one of the events they did was like a hackathon, but they say hackathon, but it was more like a workshop.
Mm.
And I had questions not because the person running it wasn't didn't know the difference, was I was genuinely curious. And I was like, I went there with open mind. I'm like, okay, so you say hackathon and we don't know what hackathons are. She was like, hey, because these kids, they can't be sleeping on the floor like that, and they need certain kids have certain accommodations they're in need. And you're like, you're absolutely right. I'm so sorry, because that's the thing I'd never thought about. But I did notice like nowadays, and hackathons are like within like hours now, no longer days over end.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's great because then now people are like, okay, we're used to this. And I notice also, how do we work with with the individuals who are on the spectrum, who are we still having this open mind and openness? Because, in most hackathons, no one really laughs at your product or whatever you build, and how can we expand it becomes all platforms, and, when you're looking for teams, it's randomized, you barely get any, like, I don't want this person on the team or whatever.
Mm.
I think that's a great way to segue into like having hackathons not only for like products but also participation for end user needs. Because I was also wondering like how do we have not regulatory like specific for individuals on a spectrum, but like have them incorporated as well as a bigger collective, because there are out there and there are good teammates. Like
Yeah,
I will that.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think that something like that would definitely get everyone involved, right? I
Mhm.
mean, just as a the ability to use them in areas where you are lacking, even if it's a matter of knowing how it feels to not be able to see. Right?
Mhm.
That's an area where I'm lacking. I don't know how it feels not to be able to see, but someone else might be able to. Right? So I think that's a really interesting um, uh, I guess event or way of thinking about it. I guess all that together, I think is something to that I hope someone considers, or maybe I can, if I have some events that get some traction for me. Speaking of which, as I'm going to plug real quick because I'm talking about events, I do have my event. Undefined. It's coming up on the 29th of June in 2 weeks from now, effectively. So if you're listening to that, hopefully you could show up to that. And if those things are I guess, successful, then yeah, I would love to do an accessibility kind of hackathon thing and see if that has some legs. I think it should, especially since now, like at the hackathon that we were at, um, the big thing, because it wasn't days and it was hours, the big thing was, okay, here's AI to effectively generate the experience for you. So you can imagine maybe that AI is the thing that gets us to the MVP, but our expertise would get us to the accessible MVP, right? So
Mhm.
those hours that you would have spent on actually making the product, but years ago before AI, well, AI traditionally hasn't been great with accessibility, from what I understand. I mean, you could tell me different, actually. Is it better for accessibility now, or where are the gaps?
The gaps are certainly where the end user needs were basically, again, it has to do with like the disability experts because they're the ones who are really engaging in these stuffs in the environments. And unfortunately, it's a wide range of spectrum. There's like just because you have a physical disability doesn't mean you don't have your medical faculties are not there, you know. So it just really it gets all lumped together. However, they are there are barriers, and it just has to do with engagement, and there are not as many as data points as there are as others. So that's another reason why. But then we again with go back to ethics. Like, do you like having people have your data harvested? But in this way, you're actually trying to figure out, okay, how do we make this more accessible for you? And how do we also create a foundation for others to benefit from this? Again, that's you're starting to go on like a little lines of like, well, yeah, it does benefit, but again, pushback would be it doesn't benefit everybody. It only benefits a small percentage. But still, it's like they're human beings. They want to do things. They want to not only just live life, but also live it in leisure.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Now, I guess another question I have when we're talking about the data privacy and the ethics, and then also customizability, right? In order for a experience to be customized to a particular individual, that experience, I would assume, needs to have data about that particular individual, right? But
yeah,
then on the flip side, if this person has um, concerns about data privacy, right, and doesn't want to share that data, then how do we balance that, right? How do we balance the requirements so that we know that in order for us to provide the most curated experience for that individual, we need data from them, but they are apprehensive about giving us this data.
yes.
What do you do about that?
Personally, I just try to. Well, that's a great thing because we're human, so we forget things. So I
Hmm.
try to memorize like the experience, and because you develop. That's another thing too, where I first noticed when working with 3D printers for accessibility and AR AI, you begin to develop like an intuition almost. And these intuitions are related to specific experiences that you normally can't generate, but you take that experience and you move it forward to a different, like end user need. So, for example, like I was this open style labs, I was working with them, and they're like wide range of disability experts. One each were okay. One needed extra support in this way, and one needed expert that way. However, if it wasn't for that experience, I wouldn't be able to make those connections. So and you just have to go out there and be engaged with and be open to like, okay, this works or does this not work for you?
Hmm.
Because ultimately speaking, it's for them, not for us.
Right. Yeah, I think the way that I'm thinking about it is the word trust, right? The
Yes, absolutely.
reason why a person doesn't want to potentially share their data is because they can't trust what this entity is going to do with that data, right? There's
Mhm.
so many examples of large companies taking your
Mhm.
data, selling it, doing nefarious things, maybe even worse with that data, so that people are very apprehensive about giving data to somebody because they don't trust what they're going to do with that data.
Yes, that's
Meanwhile, right, in a research study, in the way that maybe that you're doing it, because you are in a um, higher ed environment, you're an individual that a person can see and touch and interact with effectively. You, I believe, would be more trustworthy because I think humans tend to trust other humans, especially in the settings that they're sitting in. When it's a big, stupid company, you don't want to trust them, just overall, right? Just in generally speaking, even if traditionally they've been a good company. I mean, like Apple as an example, I'd say. I think lots of people generally do trust Apple, but then there will be points where they don't trust Apple because they screwed them somewhere, right? Because maybe something costs too much, or I can't replace the battery in my phone, or whatever the heck it is, right?
funny enough. Apple actually has initiatives in accessibility, so there are specific opportunities in those niches, and I think that's a great thing also to have people like because there is brand recognition. It's a
Right.
thing. For me, another also why I believe I don't get as much because if I say NYU, you know,
Hmm.
people everybody knows NYU, and it's a respected institution, even though technically it's not an Ivy League. Please don't come after me for that. It's,
Hmm.
it's still considered a world-round institution, and people have like brand recognition, and I've been fortunate to be able to utilize that, saying, hey. Because who would you trust? Some random person for NYU advocating for himself, or someone for like unknown like school or entity coming out because it seems like less procedures or seems like there's like enough credibility for that association. And I'm hoping and I'm being thankful that I have this brand recognition and it's like, hey, and people, I notice like people like when they speak to me about what we're doing similar in other areas, they say they get like pushback because, they feel like they are very vulnerable. And I get it, like it's just who are you trying to like say, and they've heard this many, many times, I have a solution for you. And, often not that solution does not work. And many of the times I did notice that because they are left off in that conversation to get to the solution.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think this also dovetails what we were talking about earlier with this, kind of like being able to speak in a uh, intelligent way, right? It's that bias that people have from the brand perspective, right? From a no-name institution versus an NYU institution, you immediately go, "Oh, yes, NYU, they must do the blah 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 blah." When you haven't heard of the institution, right? Then you have no frame of reference, and then you may immediately go, "Oh, well, if I haven't heard of them, it must not be important." Right? Even if that work is exceptionally important, maybe even better than what the larger companies are doing. I mean, you know, I think that the difficulty ends up being there in terms of like the work that people do out in these spaces, any space, is that you end up doing a lot better, unfortunately, when you have some big stupid name attached to it, right? And even so, even if it's a big stupid name, it doesn't necessarily mean that the work is good. I have an example of that I've said on the show before, about how Google's Material 3U came to be,
Mhm.
which the long story short of it is that there was an intern that was in a beer hall with the rest of their team, was like, "Hey, this is really boring. This material design. Could we make it more interesting?" And I'm paraphrasing, but that's effectively what happened and how Material 3U kind of came to be, and it got a lot of traction because it was Google, right? Any other place where an intern's at a beer cart and it was like, "Hey, can we do something really cool?" That wouldn't necessarily get any legs, right? But because it was Google, it got a whole bunch of legs, right? So sometimes it's just having that name attached, which unfortunately comes with the bias, sometimes good, sometimes bad, that then drives um, people to do things, whether also good or bad, you know?
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that's how humans are. And when you have someone who's like more vulnerable than us, it's like how do you like fit someone in? And like you said, trust. And I always ask, so I try to like, and I use, soft, like tone, soft language, like, hey, are you okay with this approach? And I always try to like, be as, conscious of their needs. And also that also there are classes out there for engaged because, I didn't realize. I was like, oh wow, they're not like, it's not like that it's an issue. It's just the fact that there are certain, processes one should take, and patience is one of them, acceptance is another, and all of these things that should be common, but yet, because of like certain needs and wants, ask permission, be more engaged community. And I've learned so much from being around the community. I just like, I'm very thankful that, they're entrusting in me, and I don't want to like, betray that trust in them. And I actually do want to, give them, provide them a solution, a usable solution, a great solution. And then it's like, it's not like I'm looking to get famous off this. I'm looking to make sure it works. If it works, great. If I get famous, wonderful. But my thing is like, does this work? Like you said in those does this meet the end user's needs?
Right.
Are they satisfied? And if they're not, why not? How come? How can we improve? How can we iterate? And with that, I can hopefully take those experiences and moving on. And because of that intuition, I'm able to expand more horizon.
Yeah. We're about to get close to the end of the show, but I have one more thing that I want to ask you, which is in the research and work that you've been doing in the space, where are we headed? What's the things that we should be looking out for in the research that you've been doing that might, be good, be bad? Like, what are you seeing?
A lot.
Okay.
I'm seeing a lot, sir. That's why, I'm not even sure how we can even keep up with all this stuff that's out there. Then, I only had people think it's like, oh, you got two laptops with two screens for, efficiency numbers. Like, no, sir. I got that because it was an accident because I bought one, and all of a sudden another company got another one. And just so happens I'd be able to improve my workflow. And even I'm struggling to keep up with all these kinds of literature because, there's just so many different information. And I think right now it's good and bad thing. There's good that there's a lot of information coming out. It's bad. It's like, how do you keep up with all of that? And the way I've done it is 2 times, 3 times the speed on lectures, reading PDFs, 3 or 4. I'm sure it's not for everybody, but that's the way, one way I'm able to circumvent. Like, cause I just like, I don't know how some people like can binge watch like whole show. It's great because they can make time for it. Me, I was like, there's like a lot of PDF and files and stuff and engagement I have to do. And it's like, yeah, that's where I think we're headed is like enormous amount of information that's coming at us. And I think we have to figure out a way, how do we manage that in an effective manner without us going, insane.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely an open question out there because there is a lot going on. It's moving so fast out there, but hopefully there's opportunities to figure it all out as we're moving through the space. I know that I have a whole bunch of bookmarks and watch
Right.
laters that I have to get through in somewhere somehow. But yeah, so David, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of plug anything that you have going on that you might want people to be looking at, seeing, following you on. So what do you got going on out there?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't been playing the the social media game yet. So, but I am trying to. That's why I'm on here, trying to get like exposure out and expand the community, and hopefully to make more of an impact. So, yeah, my name is very unique, David Whitewolf. Look me up on LinkedIn, connect with me. I go to hackathons. I'm starting to see more common people, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And yeah, thank you for having me. And hopefully we're heading in the right direction with all this information, and hopefully we're gonna use it for good this time.
Yeah, I hope we use it for good too. Well, thank you very much, and of course, thank you for watching the show. But before you go, please help out the show by smashing that like and subscribe button the next time, just to get notified the next time we go live. And feel free to continue the conversation on the official Design Systems Discord by visiting discord.ds.house. There it is on the bottom. Play nice in those comments, and I'll see you on the internet. Bye.